All right, so good afternoon, everyone. Let's get started. So let me share my screen. Okay. So for the dataset, when you use the link, in case you don't have it, I'll send it again. Just 1 second. Okay. So when you go to the link, it should download a zip file for you. And when you unzip it, you should see our CSVs and also the entity relationship diagram. Okay. I also put the diagram on this page. I'm not sure if everyone has access to it. That's why I just kind of copy and pasted the dataset over. Okay. And so today we're just going to go through the dataset that's called Superstore and answer a few questions in our SQL workbench. Okay. If you don't have access, let us know afterwards. I think we can grant you access to this page as well, so you can try these questions on your own again. Okay. But other than that, I'll show you the data set on my end. So even if you don't have it set up yet, you can still kind of follow along the recording. For the queries, I will be going with the kind of most direct way of answering them. So it might not be the most elegant answer. Okay. So if you have any suggestions, feel free to either speak up or type into the chat. Because with any kind of coding, there is always more than one way of answering a question, right? It just depends on how fast you can get the answer and also how well you can write a query that's both kind of short and condensed, but also readable. Okay. So without further ado, I'm going to use DataGrip, which is my editor. You can use MySQL Workbench for editor as well. The workbench or the editor itself doesn't really change the syntax. The main thing you have to think about is the language in SQL. Okay? So I'm going to be using MySQL as the query language. But you should know that there's also PostgreSQL that's very popular. There's also SQLite. There's also Oracle SQL. So they have a slight differences between them. But I think if you are new and if you do want to learn SQL, pick one of the language. So you don't have to learn about everything, right? Pick one of the language. And when you are adapting it to the other SQL languages, it shouldn't be that difficult. So some functions might exist in MySQL, but maybe call something else in, let's say, PostgreSQL or SQLite, or some function may exist in SQLite that doesn't exist in MySQL, right? So those are differences. But again, changing from one SQL language to the next shouldn't be like too intense. Okay? Right. So first thing I'm going to do is to select my default database. And for some reason, okay, sorry about this. Let me restart. Okay, so let me answer the question in the chat while I'm getting this resolved. So in the interview, how many questions should we expect and how long should we spend on each question? There's no set amount. I would say it also depends on the type of question they give you. So some companies, they will send you a link to a website, kind of like Decode, where your time. So you might have like 2 hours, 1 hour and a half to answer, let's say 4 to 5 questions. If we were comparing that to LeetCode or HackerRank questions, they would be around the easy or mid difficulty. So it won't be a hard difficulty question. There are also some companies that will send you questions as a file. So either a SQL file or a text file with some like sample data set. In that case, you usually have till the end of the workday, let's say otherwise, to answer those questions. And again, I would expect there to be around 5 questions or so. In some extreme cases, they'll send you one big case question with either one data set or no data set, but they'll describe kind of the constraints. And you have to kind of create your own data set according to the constraint to test your code. But for those, you usually have till the end of the workday, which is around 5 p.m. Right? So it depends from company to company. But I would say you're expecting 5 questions around maybe 3 easy, 2 medium level questions, or one big case study question. And the time, again, it depends on the company. So I would say focus on the medium questions a bit more than the easier level questions, because that demonstrates your skills better than the easier ones, right? The easier question might be just like 3 lines of code, while the medium one might take like joins or subqueries or even window function, right? So focus on that. The other thing is make sure you use documentations. So I'll try to do that in today's demo. So write out a few lines of strings to explain what the query is supposed to do. Answer the question first. So that's the key, right? Answer the question so you have the desired result first. And if you do have more time, then add more documentations if needed, or try to optimize your code. And in some cases, think about edge cases, right? So even if they haven't given you data that might be misleading or missing, right? It could be the sample itself doesn't have that, but in their overall data set, with some company would take a query and run it on their overall data set to see what the result is. In those cases, they may have some edge cases. As long as it's within the restraint that they gave you, anything is possible, right? So if they say this is a datetime column, it doesn't mean that everything inside has to be a datetime format or everything inside has to exist. There could be missing values. There could be, just a string where it's wrong data set, right? So in your code, at the end, think about how you can handle that. If you don't have time to do all that, right, to optimize and to think about edge cases, don't stress too much, because usually after your coding interview, there usually is another kind of one-to-one or behavior interview, where they will ask you to either explain your code or give you edge cases about the code itself. So that will be the time you want to demonstrate your knowledge as well. Okay. All right. So again, if you have any questions, whether it's on the data set or just general questions like that, feel free to type in the chat or speak up. Okay. In the link format questions, do we have an area to test our code before submitting? Okay. So again, it depends. Some websites, they will have like 1 or 2 test cases for you to try out, or like a few rows of data for you to try out. There are websites where there is no test areas. So I would say you could still have your editor open, right? So you have the website open and also your editor open. And basically you try out the code on your local computer before you submit it, right? So if you're not sure whether the code is working properly, because again, some functions might be different between the SQL languages, try out, right? Even if you just have like 1 or 2 lines of data that you can try out, quickly try out and then submit it. So you may not always have an area test, but I think majority of them do give you the chance to test your code. All right, so going back here, so today we're going to use the Superstore dataset, right? So with your query, first you want to do is select your data set. Right? In a lot of editors, you can do that just by clicking on a drop-down list to select. But for the interview, make sure you write in code, right? Don't just say I clicked on a drop-down list. Right? That's not what they're looking for. And first thing you want to do is understand the data set, right? If your interview is just giving you, let's say, a link to their data set where you can connect, right, by creating a data source link. If that's the case, definitely show these queries, right? So show tables. Okay? Definitely run these queries so you can show them that, this is a normal way of inspecting things, right? Select count star from each of the table. So customers, right? I'm not going to do all of them, but I'll just show you a few of them, right? Select count star from as orders, or even just have like a select star from products, limit, let's say 5. Okay. So I know they seem like very basic queries, something that you may not even do if you're familiar with the data set. But if they give you a link,
Sorry, I'm late. Sorry, I'm late.
yeah, it's okay. Don't worry. Right. So if they give you a link to the data set, definitely show these queries just to show them that, I know the first step is to understand the data set, right? Instead of just answer the question right away, right? So these ones, get yourself familiar with the data as well before you start writing your answers. Okay. So again, I'm not going to write out all the count tables because we do have 4 tables. Okay. For those of you who came a bit late, again, it may be a bit like time constraint, but this is the data set you can download and try out later on. And again, I'll send you this link for now. If you don't have access, message me or Adam later on, and we'll try to grant you access to it so you can try out these questions on your own. Okay. So with the data set again, usually you want to have understanding of how they're connected. So there's usually a ERD or entity relationship diagram. Okay. If it doesn't exist, you don't have access. Okay. So just download the dataset for now. I'll go through the questions one at a time. Okay. The dataset should be available as a zip file. Okay. So if they don't have an ERD, it's safe to assume that the tables are connected by columns that are the same name, right? So if this doesn't exist, and I see there's a product table and there's an orders table, I'll see that there's a product ID in products table and there's a product ID in orders table. It's safe to assume that that's how they're connected. Okay. If they do have one, that'll be the best. Okay. Sometimes they gave it to you, sometimes they not. Right. So just make those assumptions. If you're not sure your assumption is correct, you can always leave it as a no. Okay. So you can always say like my assumption.
James, you might just want to mute your mic there.
So my assumption is that the tables, you might, sorry, is there a way for me to change the background? No, I'm just going to type it out because when I do a comment, it's not showing, right? So my assumption is that
James, man, you gotta mute up, James, man.
Sorry,
Like,
sorry.
no, but like, yeah, that's fine. Just like the mute button in the bottom left corner, like when you need to mute the mic, man.
Okay. So you can just always type this into your code, right, for the interview. So my assumption is that the tables are connected by columns, or technically you should say fields, because that's the technical name in SQL, right, by fields with the same name. Okay. So if you're not sure your assumption is correct, it's always a good idea to put it as a note in your file, right? So this is my assumption. And then if it's not correct, at least they see, okay, that's why it's not exactly matching up, right? And if it is correct, you just see a note, they're not going to like deduct points, or they're not going to say, oh, this person is being too careful, right? Okay. So again, this is our data set. We have 4 tables: orders, returns, orders, returns, products, and customer. Okay. And we're just going to go through some of these questions. Okay. We're probably not going to have enough time to do all of them. I just made a bunch of them so you can try out on your own. Again, we'll grant you access if you don't have access later on. Okay. But let's start out with some simple ones in the warm-up. So we'll do like 2 questions in the warm-up, and we'll focus on the medium level difficulties. Okay. So let's start with the first one. Right? How many customers are in each province? So if we look at the customer table, right, we see that there is a province field. Right? So this will be just simple group by. Okay. So we can do select, count, or let me show you the table first. Select star from customers, limit 5. Okay, so we have customer ID, customer name, province, region, and also the customer segment. Right? So since we're looking at how many customers are in each province, we'll just do select, count, star from customers, group by province. Oh, sorry, I should also have province in front. Otherwise, it's just a bunch of numbers. Right? So here we just have a very simple query to go to. Okay. Now, one thing you could do to make it a bit better, right, is to say count distinct customer ID. Now, it's arguable that because the customer ID is used as an index for the customer table, there's no need for distinct. Okay, but unless you see it as the actual primary key, so unless you see it as the actual primary key, there's no harm in adding the keyword distinct, right? It just kind of shows them that in case they're duplicates, right? Customer has 2 entries, you're not counting that customer twice, right? So it's just a very simple thing for you to do, but it does show to the employer or the recruiter that you are careful on the details. The other thing you may want to do is just give an alias. Again, these are things that you can do at the end after you have finished answering all the questions. Okay, just beautify your output a little bit. Okay, but it's nothing that will be too crucial if they are looking for a good person with SQL knowledge. So, okay, let's just do one more easy question, and then we will move on to the medium level ones. Okay, let me just copy over. So let's look at this one. Okay, so how many orders were placed in 2010? Okay. Now, first thing we want to look at is what are the years, right? So select distinct.
Hey, I'm Jared.
year.
I'm sorry I'm late.
Yeah, that's fine. Don't worry. Okay, order date from orders. Right. So
Oh, hey, Jared.
So you do see there is a 2010. Okay. Now, year is one of the functions that are not available across the SQL languages. Right. So I found out the hard way. So in some SQL language, there is no year function. There is a like strip time function, or there are other ways to get the year. Okay. So if you are working with other SQL languages, you may not have the year function, but you should know how to get the year from the datetime column. Okay. So here is our years. So we just want the 2010 ones. Okay. So we can do select, count, and distinct, order ID. Actually, let me put a year first. So you can say year, order date, count, distinct, order ID from orders, and then group by year. Oh, what's going on? Order date.
There is penis on screen.
What's going on here? There. 1 second. Okay, let's not do something childish, since we're just here to practice our skills. Okay. So we can do this, right? And this will give us all the years and all the number of orders. Okay. But since we just won during 2010, right, it's better to have the filter. Right. So where year, order date equal to 2010. Okay. So although both answers are acceptable, I would say this will be, again, let's not do that, everyone. Okay. So do we need group by here? If you are doing a count and aggregation, yes, you would need a group by, right? So if you just want to show all the orders, so instead of saying how many orders, but you want to show all the orders, then no need for group by, right? But because you are doing an aggregation, you do need a group by in your statement. Again, 2 easy questions to get started. Okay. Now let's try out some medium level questions. So again, we'll start with the first one in here. So how much revenue was generated from each province? Okay. So in this case, you need to kind of understand the table layout, right? So we want revenue, which means we want the sales amount. Okay. And we say that sales is in the orders table. Okay. We also want province, but province in the customer table. So that means we need to do a type of join between these two. Okay. So we would just do select province and then sum of sales as total. Okay. From orders. And we can do a join customers. Okay. And since they are joined by the customer ID, we can just do using customer ID. Yes, I will make sure to post the answer key as well for these queries. Okay. And then, group by.
Yes.
Now, for those of you who are used to group by, you know that there is a kind of shortcut or a lazier way of doing this. Instead of saying group by province and typing out the column itself, you can do a group by 1, which refers to the first column, right? Or if you have multiple columns, you can use the column number in your select statement to do that. I would say this is not recommended during the interview. Okay, so even though this is easier to write, and for those who are experienced with SQL, this is the same as this one, right? But you should know that sometimes the queries are not just read by the coding team, right? It might be read by other people as well. Okay, can we stop doing that, please? Thank you. Okay, so it's always better to write out the column name, right? Instead of just typing a 1, 2, or 3. Right? So even though it's easier to write and most people used to SQL knows what that means, it's always better to write out the name instead of just typing out the numbers. Okay?
Hey, there was a penis on the screen.
All right, just give me one moment. All right, that should be fine now. Sorry, give me one here. Okay, I think that should be fine now. Okay, so those are just some things I want you to pay attention to, right? So even though your query could work fine, and it does, work in the same way as, having it all written out, it's always better to write it out. Okay. How do I change that? I actually don't. Give me 1 second. Okay, I don't think I can change the settings during the meeting. We'll try to. Oh, sorry. There we go. Okay, I think that should be fine. Okay. All right. So,
When does the return on investment coming?
pardon? Was there a question in this?
Excuse me.
Sorry,
I feel
no,
like
I
they are
understand
not
now. I
serious,
understand.
so please, yeah, remove them.
Yeah,
No,
okay.
no, I am being serious. Just I understand now. I had question, but I'm understanding now.
You can write it instead of interrupting him, please.
Okay, my
Sorry for
apologies.
disturbing.
Okay, my apologies.
Sure. Let's see. Is there a way I can? Okay. There we go. All right. So yeah. So let's just keep the chatter in the chat then. Okay. All right. Let's do another one. We'll go a bit over time just to make up for that. But let's try a pivot table. Okay. So pivot tables are something that is good to know as well, right? So the reason you want to create a pivot table is that with a group by, the list might be very long and it's harder for people to see it. Okay. So let's take this question for example. So we want to create a pivot table to show the number of orders by shipping mode and priority. Okay. So if we do this in group by, we can do select, let's say count distinct order ID. But I should put the other two in front. So shipping mode and order priority. Okay. From orders. Ship mode. Okay. And just do a group by ship mode and order priority. Okay. So I can do it this way. Answer the same question without the pivot table. Right? But the result is very long. So if you look down here, right, it's very long. And it's harder to make comparisons between the same order priority but different ship mode, or the same ship mode but different order priorities. Okay. So that's where a pivot table comes in, right? So a pivot table, it just takes one of the column to be the rows and the other column to be the actual columns. Okay. And if the question just said create a pivot table, you can decide which one to be the rows and which one to be the columns. Right? And the easier to decide for that, I would say just use select distinct on these two columns to see which one has less unity input. Right? So we can do select distinct ship mode from orders. So this one has 3: express air, regular air, and delivery truck. And we can do select distinct order priority from orders. Right? And this one we see has 4. Okay. So it might be easier to put ship mode as the columns since we have to write out the columns. and have the order priority as the rows, since we can just do a select order priority. Right? Again, there is no right or wrong. You can do it the other way around as well. Just depends on which one you feel is easier to work. Okay. So for this, I'm just going to do select order priority. So that will be my rows. And then I'll do case win, that sum of case win. Should I do sum? No, sorry. Let me do actually count. Count string. Okay, just like before. And then case win, I'm going to say ship mode equal to delivery truck. Okay. Then I want the order ID. Okay, and end. So with a case win, always remember to have an end. Oh, so I'm using MySQL. Yeah, thank you for the question. Yeah, I'm using MySQL. Again, the popular ones are Oracle, Postgres, and SQLite, I would say. There's other ones out there as well, right? Not just those that I listed, but some of the syntax will be the same. Some functions will be different. So make sure you know that if you're applying for jobs, they're asking for different SQL languages. Right? So with this, I can say as delivery truck. And for the other two, I can just copy and paste. Making sure that I change the ship mode. Right? So this one will be express error. And the last one here will be regular error. So here again, I have a column and some aggregations. That means I need to do a group by. Okay, so anytime you have like one column and bunch of aggregations, you know a group by is needed. And the group by is usually the column that's outside the aggregation. Right? So here I want this to be from orders. And just do a group by order priority. Okay. And this is my pivot table. Yeah, so the recording should be available. I would definitely ask Adam to make it available to everyone here. So again, the web page, I will ask it to be available. The recording, I ask it to be available. So then you will be able to do both. If the coding interview expects SQL version, SQL Server version, yeah, that's submit SQL to live field without people. So for the for the coding interview, you do want to use their SQL language. Right? Sometimes they'll give you a choice. They'll say, use whatever language you want. In that case, make a note, like as a comment, right? To say, I'm using SQLite, or I'm using MySQL or PostgreSQL. But if you're applying for a job and they're saying, use PostgreSQL, then you have to use PostgreSQL to answer. Right? So it depends on the interview again. I think majority of them will say use whatever SQL you want, because they know that transferring between language is very easy. Yeah, go ahead. I'll just type in the chat. Okay. Right. So yeah, so as long as you make a note of the language you're using, then of course, yeah. So just they would understand, right? Yeah. So if you have questions, just type in the chat. Do I need to sign up? I don't see you need to sign up. I'll ask Adam to just make that page available to you. Maybe you need to sign up for an account. Oh, that's a good question. So yeah, so sorry, let me address the question from Hassan. So maybe you do need to sign up to access the page later on. But let me just ask Adam to see if we can make it available without sign up, because I know some of you may not want to sign up just for one page. If not, he'll make an announcement to everyone. Okay. And for Caroline's question, so after you download the zip file, how do you load the files into the database? So once you download, the zip file, make sure you unzip it so that you have your Superstore folder. There is a Superstore loading SQL file. Right? So if you open that, this should have basically all the code written. The only thing you need to change will be the path. Okay, so for me, my Superstore is in users WCD download Superstore. Okay, so then from my path will be users WCD and Superstore. Right, so I need to change all of them, and all I have to do is run this entire script to get set up. For those who are new to SQL, if you're using Mac, you just start with the slash, so slash users. Okay, if you're using Windows, you need to add C:/users. Okay, so that's the difference between Windows and Mac. Similarly, if you just want to copy the path, so if you get info and you can just kind of copy the path. Okay, for Mac, I think is okay. So the formatting is okay. For Windows, it's actually the other way around, and that will give you an error. So you have to switch all these slashes to the kind of forward slash. So Mac is a bit easier to work with. Can just copy and paste. Make sure you add /customers. And sorry, I think I made a mistake in this one. That should be orders, so on and so forth. Okay, yeah. So for the path, you would just either copy and paste it, right? For Windows users, if you copy and paste the path, it will be, let's say, C users, WCD downloads, and so on, right? So all these slashes are backwards, so you have to change them. Okay, otherwise it's going to give you an error. Oh, it's a data link, yes. So give me 1 second. And I'll just post it in the chat again for those of you who may have missed it. Okay. Okay. So yeah, so for Windows is a bit tougher to do this. For Mac is a bit easier. Not sure why. Okay. But just make sure it's forward slash. Okay. Oh, and I think I made a mistake with the CSVs. Make sure it has the correct CSVs as well. That was my bad. Right. So it should be order CSV and product CSV and so on and so forth. Okay. So there's be 4 CSVs that you need to change. Everything else, you should be able to just run it directly. Okay. If you are getting errors, so sometimes when you are loading in data and you are getting errors, just say like local info not allowed, things like that. There's 2 things you need to check. One is the one that I put in here, where it set the global local info to be 1. This means that your script is allowed to upload. Okay. The other is to go to your data source. Sorry, just go to your data source. Okay, go to advanced and make sure either allow load local info to be true, or if you're using, let's say, MySQL Workbench, you need to say op local info equal. So 1 is true, just like in most programming languages. Right? So you may need to add that in to the advanced tab. In your actual work, this is not something that you need to worry about, because usually you will not have permission to change tables, to add tables, or to create databases. Right? Because imagine you're in a company of, let's say, 100 employees, and everyone's creating their own database and their own tables, right? It's going to get very messy in their server. So usually is, let's say, the team lead or the data engineers that have the ability to create tables, to manipulate tables, right? And you would have the ability to read from the database, from the tables, okay? So it's something good for you to learn, because if you want to do practice on your own server, right, you need to know how to load in files. But realistically, in your work, you probably don't need to do this. Okay? You can just give a link and connect to it. And so again, if you have any other questions, feel free to type in the chat. In the meantime, let me just do one more question from the mid difficulty. Okay. So we did a pivot table. So let me try this one. Okay. So what are the names of the top 10 most popular product? Which category and subcategory do they belong to? Okay. So I try to make these questions a bit more comprehensive, meaning you use a bit more functions than just like a simple join and select. Okay. So in this one, again, we need to kind of understand our table. Okay. But for this one, I think we just are working within the products table. Or sorry. Oh, I should say is orders table as well, right? How many are being sold? So first thing I want to do is just to select how many items are being sold for each product. I can say select product ID. Okay. And I can do a sum of order quantity as count from orders. And again, one column, one aggregation function means there needs to be a group by. So group by product ID. Okay. Now at this stage, since I just want top 10, I could do this. So I can do order by count descending. Okay, so now the biggest numbers on top, the smallest numbers on the bottom. And just do like a limit 10. Right, to just get the top 10. Okay. And with this, I have my product ID and all this, right? I can use this as a subquery in my products. So I can say select product name, product category, product subcategory, okay, from products, okay, where product ID is in. And because I'm using this subquery as a filter, right, I cannot have two columns. I can only have one. And I need the product ID column only. I don't need this. So basically the same query, okay, without the sum column. But then count doesn't exist, so I have the sum order quantity. Right, so you may have to do some altering for the subqueries. Nope. Oh, it doesn't allow me to do that. So that is one thing that could happen. In some, I think the one that I tested before, it allowed me to. Right, so it's not the best solution. That's what I'm trying to get. You could do CTE for this one. I didn't do it just because it's a very kind of quick query. I don't really use this too often later on, right? If you have a query that's used very often, that might be a better idea to speed up the process, or even just creating a view, right, to speed up the process of your query. For this one, I just kind of hard encode it. Okay. So for this one, limit 10 here it says it doesn't allow it. Okay, which means I cannot go this way. Okay. So the other way to get the top 10 products would be to use a window function, right? A rank function. So I can take my query without the limit, technically without the order by 2, but I can just do it this way. Right? And I can do select product ID, count, with a star, and then do a rank over order by count, descending as ranking. Okay, all this is from my subquery. And since I'm using it as a table, I need to give an alias. Right? So now I have a ranking. And again, depending on the language, sometimes they'll allow you to do a filter here. So they allow you to do a having ranking less than or equal to 10. Okay. Some of them, like this one, does not allow you to do it. So you had to do another subquery on top of this. Right? So it depends on the language. Some language allows you to do having with a window function output. Some of them, or most of them, I should say, do not allow you to. Which means now, yeah, I just want the product ID because I'm going to put it into the condition. I'm going to select product ID. Okay. From this. Okay. And have a where ranking is less than or equal to 10. Okay. Now you can see here I have 11 rows, right? Because before when I did the ranking, there are 2 that are rank 10. So that's another thing that you may miss with a limit 10. Right? So limit is a very fast way of getting the top few or the bottom few, but it's not the best way of doing it. Right? So always use ranking if they want the top 10 or top 5, right? Just in case some of them are the same rank, right? You get all of them. Okay, and then the last step is the same as before. So I can do select product name, product subcategory, sorry, product category, product subcategory, from products, okay, where product ID is in subquery. Okay, to give me my output. Okay. So with any question, even with something that looks complicated at the end like this, take it one step at a time, right? Think about what they're asking. So what are the top 10 most popular? Right? To me here, I made an assumption to say top 10 popular means the ones that were sold the most, right? The ones that were selling the fastest. So that's why I used a sum of order quantity, right? And then from here, I want to think, okay, how do I get top 10? Well, I can get top 10 from the rank, right? And I only want 10, so I need some kind of filter, right? Since I cannot do the filter directly on rank, I need to do another subquery to get the top 10, right? And then from that, I then select my name, category, and subcategory, right? And do this filter. And this is a good example to show you, right? With all these subqueries embedded within each other, okay? First you want to do is make sure you have the correct indentations. Okay, so it's easier for them to read it. Okay. The second thing is again add comments, right? Add descriptions. So for the subquery, right? This is to get. Let me write out the comment first. To get the sales amount, or sorry, not sales amount. To get the number of products sold. So that's one comment. And then for the next one, right, the reason I have this query is to get a rank. So that's what I was saying, right? I want to create a rank for the products based on number of products. So, okay. Then this one, I just want the top 10 products only, right? So that's where the filter comes in. Okay, and then my final result. So when you, especially when you have subqueries, right, that are embedded, make sure you do add these comments. Right? Otherwise, it does get difficult for people to understand it. Even when they run it to get the correct result, they still want to be able to read it. Okay? In your work, same thing, right? Don't just create a query that works. Make sure you create a query that is easily understandable. Because usually when you're at work, you're sharing the code or you're working together in a team. Right? So after you solve it, maybe someone else have a similar problem, but that's slightly different, right? So they want to take your query and adapt it to their purpose. Okay? So comments are the best thing to do here. Otherwise, when you're sharing code, you also have to ask the person who wrote it, right? What do you do here? Why this needed, right? Can I simplify the code? So it gets a bit more difficult there. Okay, so the question in the chat is, will SQL coding interview be also conducted in live coding format with someone watching? Due to the pandemic, it's not, I would say, again, depends on the company, but most of them have switched to like remote way, right? So they don't really watch you code directly, but they'll make sure that the question is very unique. So it's not something that you will be able to find online. Like, here's a SQL, here's a legal question. You can find the question answer online and paste it in. It will be something that is very similar, but with a lot of twists and turns. So they don't need to watch you anymore. They'll know that if you just copy and paste, there are some cases that they have that will not go through. Again, some companies will send you a link to a proctored, basically a timed website that you're going to code on their website, right? So they don't need to watch you, but basically you have like an hour or 2 hours to answer the questions, right? There are still some rare cases where they do ask you to code while they're watching you, right? Or they'll ask you to code while kind of explaining to them what you're doing. But those, I would say, it's not that common anymore. Okay. And then the even rare case is to ask you to go in person to write out the code. And for those, it will be a bit more difficult because I have heard some of them will ask you to write the code in like Word instead of a IDE, or they'll ask you to write the code on paper, right? So you can't really test the code anymore. Those might be more for like senior levels where they are expecting you to understand the basic structures, the basic queries off the top of your head instead of kind of running and checking your mistakes. Okay. Okay. So we'll do one more question and I'll leave the room up for more questions from you. Okay. So let's just do this is the last one here. Okay, so create a pivot table that shows the amount of sales made during weekday versus weekend for each month. Okay, so for this one, again, you need to understand how the table looks, right? So you can do select star from orders, limit 5. Okay, and you should see, so you can see in here, but you should see, because we're doing it by months, right? There could be multiple rows by months, right? So first, basically, we need to get a month's total. Okay, and then we need to sorry, we need to actually get a day total as well. Some of them have multiple orders per day. So when you get the day total, right? Then we need to separate it by weekdays and weekends. And then we need to group by months, right? So each month has different dates. So to do this one step at a time, right? So first I want to get daily total. Okay. So to do that, I would do select order date. Okay. And I'll do a sum of sales as daily total from orders, and then group by order date. Okay. Again, this is due to the way that the table is structured. Some table you do not need to do this because it might be just one day has one row, so this is not necessary. Okay. Now the next thing I want to do is to separate it from weekdays and weekends. Okay, so there's some functions that you need to know, right? So if we do, I'm just going to show you for the first few rows. From orders, limit 10, right? So if we take our date, we could apply a function called weekday. Okay, and that will give us a bunch of numbers. Okay, or we can actually apply something called day of week, which will also give us a bunch of numbers. Okay, so you need to know what these numbers mean. Right, so there's two ways of getting numerical values for the weekdays. Right, there's also one thing called day name. Again, these are not functions that are available through all the SQL languages, so you need to be familiar with them across, let's say, in SQLite or PostgreSQL, right? So there's a word day, right? And now we have the actual strings of the weekdays. So my suggestion to everyone, if you are working with MySQL, you should be comfortable with one of these two. Okay, so either learn weekday by the top of your head. So 0 is Monday, 6 is Sunday, right? It goes in order, or day of week, right? Which is 1 Sunday and then 7 is Saturday, right? Know one of them by heart. Okay? You don't need to know both of them. Okay, and day name is good to know, but when you are coding, it's always better to use numbers than the strings, right? Especially since I'm separating it for weekday and weekends, right? If I'm using strings, right, I had to type out if it's weekend, the day name is Sunday or Saturday, right? But if I'm using, let's say, weekday, right, Saturday and Sunday are 5 and 6, right? So I can just say weekday is greater than 4, right? That will give me 5 and 6, right? So it's easier to know the numbers, but you should know what these numbers correspond to. Okay, so learn one of them if you doesn't know them yet. Okay, and use day name for now to help you remember what they are. Okay, but in actual practice, these two are used more often than day name itself. Okay, so now that I have the subquery, okay, I'm going to write out select months of order date. Okay, and I want a weekend and a weekday. So I want sum of case when. Okay, so weekday, I say order date is greater than 4. Then I want the daily total. Okay, and I want to call this as weekend. Okay, and I'll do the same. Only this time should be less than 5. And I'll call this as weekday. Okay, all this is from my subquery here. Okay, and then group by months of order date. Adding email order by months of order date to give me my pivot table. Okay. And again, since you're using subqueries, it's always good to add comments, right? Tell them what is the subquery doing, or even like with case wins, you may want to put some comments as well. So this is add daily total when it is weekend, right? So some simple comments just to make sure your code is easily readable. All right, so like I said, I'll try to ask Adam to make this web page available to everyone. And also, if you haven't got the data set, I'll make sure he sends a link with data set as well. Okay. The recording, I'll ask Adam to send the recording. But before I end today's session, are there any questions that you have about SQL interviews or about the data set that we're working with? Which is better for practice, LeetCode or HackerRank? So personally, I would say HackerRank has more questions for SQL than LeetCode does. Right, so LeetCode has a handful, but I think HackerRank has more. And you can just easily separate them in both cases for difficulties, right? If you're talking about other practices, so like Python, for example, maybe LeetCode is better. So for SQL, I would say HackerRank. Again, that's my personal preference. But yeah, LeetCode does have some. They're just not that many. If you don't have that, what do you suggest? Oh, so if you don't have that grip, I would suggest you to use MySQL Workbench. Okay, I would say SQL Workbench is used more commonly by people in the industry than DataGrip actually, right? DataGrip is a very good tool for learning to code in SQL. The reason is they color code a lot of the keywords and they have some auto formatting, right? MySQL Run does have formatting and they do have some color coding, but it's not as kind of automated as DataGrip. Yes, so I think, again, I'll try to make this web page available. I did link these two to their respective websites. So this one is the Workbench, and if you don't have MySQL Server, you need to have it downloaded as well, right? If you want to do it yourself, you can just search for it online. So both Workbench and SQL Server, they should be free. The DataGrip is not free, but if you do enroll in some of our kind of self-paced courses, we should be able to send you a license that's free for a year. Yeah. So again, for those things, make sure you email or message Adam because he's the one that's in charge of all those licenses. Okay. Any other questions? Oh, what's Adam's email? That's a good question. I just want to make sure I have it correct. So give me one moment. Let me just look it up. Yes, sorry. Give me one moment. I just want to make sure I have it absolutely correct. I don't want you to be sending email to someone else. So his email is okay. And in case he doesn't respond in time, you can also message me as well. Okay. But I think for all the licensings, for all the kind of administrative stuff, he has the access. I don't. So yeah. Any other questions or comments that you have? All right. In that case, thank you everyone for taking your time out. So recording, I'm not sure. Ask Adam. Maybe it's on YouTube. Maybe he'll just send you a link. So I'll ask him how he's doing this. Yeah. Okay. Again, thank you everyone for taking your time out during lunch to join me for this quick session. If you do have any questions, you can always message us. I send the emails in the chat. And hopefully we'll meet each other, whether it's in the industry or just on the street and have a quick chat. Okay. Other than that, have a good day, everyone, and hopefully see you all next time. Okay. Oh, the next session, I think we have one tomorrow. I'm not sure the topic. I think we should have, again, ask Adam. I think he has the schedule, I would say. But I do believe we have another session tomorrow on a different topic by a different instructor. Yeah, so message Adam and to make sure. Oh, good question. So before we leave out, so can you explain inner versus outer join? Okay. So inner join is, well, both are joins, right? So you're putting two tables together. Inner join is when you are joining on the column where the data is in common. So just as a quick example here, right? So let's say we have column that's A, oops, that's not a good color. Let's say we have columns A, B, C in the first column. So this is C1 from the first table. And then we have another column, let's say C2 from the second table. That is B, C, E. Okay. Inner join would be finding the one that's in common, right? So inner join will just get you B and C rows. Outer join is getting everything. So you have A, B, C, and E, right? So that's the simplest explanation I can give you. For subqueries, subquery is just basically multi-step, right? In the I'll say in your query itself. So it's something that you cannot do with one table. You had to do kind of filtering or grouping like we have seen today. You can use subqueries as either a table or as a condition. A table, you had to give an alias. A condition, you can only have one column. Okay. Again, I'm doing a kind of condensed explanation for today, just due to time. If you do have more questions, feel free to message us. Okay. The stored process procedures, basically, if you are, yes. So I'll answer these questions just since he put them in. So for stored procedures, basically we are seeing how the data is being transferred from one place to another, and also when you're selecting, when you're creating tables, right? You have to first create a schema, then you put in the data itself, right? So that's the easiest way to explain that. There's other things, again, we can talk about that through email. How to optimize queries, you're looking at eliminating unnecessary rows and columns. You're looking at if you can do filtering before joins, right? Versus filtering after joins. You're looking at things like optimizing time and memory. Okay. For normalization, you want to basically standardize everything. Okay. Again, I'll explain that more in detail if you message me later on. When to use the in clause. I think that is the where filters, right? So in is if you have a list of values instead of just one value. And in will just go with each one of the matches in the filter itself. Okay. So again, sorry about the quick explanations, but due to the time, I just want to wrap it up a bit fast. For any of you do have questions on SQL, so more technical questions like that, feel free to message me or Adam later on. and we'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. Okay. All right, so we'll wrap up here. Again, thank you everyone for joining us today. Okay, hopefully I'll see you all in the future. Bye, everyone.